The United States is an ignorant country full of lazy, gun-addicted people waiting around a cultural desert that they couldn't even find on a map. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Slow down, internet. Buy us dinner first. That's the picture I get of the US on social media these days, but even sometimes in person. Look, I get that we have a dangerously moronic fascist of a president that makes Moe from the Three Stooges look like a molecular biologist. But it always felt strange to me to respond to an insulting moron by being an insulting moron. The assumptions about Americans don't end there. To the denizens of faceless, anonymous social media accounts, there's a lot wrong with us. We're disinterested in the rest of the world, we're obsessed with guns, we only speak one language, and we don't know any geography. On top of it all, from sea to shining sea, across roughly 3 million square miles, we live in a cultural wasteland. But is any of that actually true? Do we in fact not know where the biblioteca is? Or perhaps, are we missing a bit of nuance here? I'm Joe Bauer, an American who's been living in and traveling around Europe for the past 10 years. And I make videos about the reality of living abroad and everything Americans get wrong about this side of the pond. But this time, I'm turning the mirror around on my European neighbors. So why does the internet hate Americans? Before I dive in, let me say in unequivocal terms that this is not a defense of the US government or its history. If you've watched or read anything I've written, then you know my contempt for this regime is a kind of burning rage that an Italian might hold for pineapple on a pizza. This is a defense of people, human beings, plain and simple. And at the end of this video, I'll explain who are the ones actually suffering from everything the internet thinks is wrong with the United States. So why are all of these lazy stereotypes spreading around online? In short, I fully blame the government and our sordid history of bombing first, asking questions later. And now, our clown show of a government has cannibalized world news and politics, directly impacting economies and livelihoods around the world. Now, criticize that all you want. I do it in just about every single video or essay I make. But I still think it's important to separate the people from their government as much as possible. Or we're no better than the Trumps and Stephen Millers of the world, who are just as eager to make baseless claims of an entire people. And come on, let's be honest, people. If you find yourself doing anything remotely like a Trump or a Miller, it's long past time to self-reflect. Now, broadly speaking, I think most people around the globe are the same in their faults and virtues. Americans are no different. Some of us volunteer, donate to charity, and protest for our neighbor. Others lie, cheat, steal, and crop dust in a crowded room, just like you. Speaking of the world, one of the biggest stereotypes I always hear about is that Americans don't have passports. Ipso facto, they are disinterested in the rest of the world. The reality is, roughly 45 to 50% of Americans have a passport. So, Americans don't have a passport just isn't true. There are roughly 340 million people living in the United States who live in vastly different environments all across the political spectrum. It's silly to try and paint that many people with a broad brush, no matter how much you, rightfully so, detest their political leadership. Now, for comparison's sake, I did try looking into the number of passport holders in some European countries. It was hard to come by any hard data, but this article claims barely half of French citizens have a passport, and this survey says only 41% of German citizens have a passport. Now, before some of you freak out in the comments, I honestly don't know how accurate those numbers are. But I wouldn't be surprised if the percentage of European passport holders across the continent is similar to the US. One of the reasons I believe this is because of Schengen, which allows you to cross 29 borders in Europe without a border check. For somebody who's done it on both sides of the pond, it's as easy as crossing state lines in the US, across a similarly sized geography. But for shits and giggles, let's look at why an American might not have a passport. Imagine you live in Kansas, smack dab in the middle of the country. You're nearly 1,000 miles away from the nearest international border. Generally, flying is more expensive in the United States. Add on top of that the well-reported fact that Americans, generally speaking, get less vacation time than Europeans. So most Americans settle for shorter weekend getaways because that's all they have time for and can afford. If Americans don't travel as much as you'd like, then don't blame Americans. Americans would love to travel more. They're just stuck in a broken live-to-work system. It's why when an American does finally find time to travel to Europe, they truly travel to Europe, going to as many countries as possible in a whirlwind tour that's dizzying just reading the itinerary. And that brings up one last point. It's anecdotal, so I just wanted to throw it at the end of this section. As much as the internet likes to bash Americans for supposedly not having a passport or traveling enough, the internet also complains about loud Americans infiltrating their cities, towns, and villages. So explain to me how Americans can be both navel-gazing cultural dullards with no interest in the outside world, while simultaneously crashing your dinner conversation when we start chatting at an Applebee's decibel level. I won't dwell too long on this one because I already did a video all about the ubiquity of suburban slop infrastructure in the United States and how it fuels the obesity crisis in the country, which, yes, is a real thing. But I don't believe that Americans are inherently lazy, like it's something special in our DNA. It's humans who are inherently lazy, no matter where they come from. Or at least we want to be lazy. Our brains are wired to prefer convenience over effort. In much of Europe, walking, taking public transit, and cycling are often the easiest option for most, if not everything you need to do. So we generally walk a lot more in Europe than the average American would in the United States. And as I've talked about before, walking is one of the healthiest things you can do for your body. It's how Italians can subsist off of carbs with a side of carbs, topped with some carbs, and not explode. Americans are as lazy as the environment they're in allows them to be, just as anyone else would be regardless of their nationality. I firmly believe that if walking were prioritized to be the easiest option in American urban development, people would be doing it over driving. They would walk because, like everyone else in the world, we're human beings, and human beings are lazy. This one is easy to dispel, but it's further proof that plenty of outsiders think they understand the United States simply based on the media they consume about the country. The US? Oh, you mean that country where guns remain the leading cause of death for children and they don't do anything about it? On its surface, the omnipresence of guns in our news headlines, films, and television shows do make us all look a bit Yosemite Sam.
I ain't no mamby-pamby.
But like with passports, the data tells another story. For that, we'll go to Pew, which feels a little ironic given the topic. You know, pew pew. Anyway. Based on a survey from 2023, 32% of Americans personally own a gun. That's not wildly higher than Switzerland's 28%. The real difference between the two countries is gun control. And on that point, 58% of Americans would like to see stricter gun laws. I am no fan of guns by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like 32% gun ownership and a majority favoring stricter gun laws falls well below the arbitrary threshold of obsessed. Like so many of the US's problems, it's a loud, and in this case, deadly minority that drive the narrative and damage our reputation abroad. So just remember that most of us think gun culture, even as overstated as it might be, is batshit insane, and we'd rather settle our differences the old-fashioned way. That is, of course, with Gene Wilder directing punches.
11 o'clock!
Now digging into this one, I learned that much of this stereotype seems to stem from our own late-night talk shows. Here on Jimmy Kimmel Live, we see people failing to name countries, any country, on a map.
Can you name any country on this map?
Honestly, my geography is so horrible. I can't name anything. Like
Try
nothing.
naming something.
Is it South Africa?
Nope.
We have the country of Asia.
Nope. That's a continent, and
Oh,
that's
oops.
Russia.
Oh, damn. I'm silly.
Where's America?
I would say this big one, but I'm probably wrong.
You're definitely wrong.
Okay.
Now, I didn't think it needed to be explained, but comedy shows are often edited for, you know, comedy, to make people laugh. It wouldn't be very funny if a Yakko Warner type popped in and correctly named every country in the world. Come to think of it, actually that would be pretty cool, but you get the point. In terms of data, I found this National Geographic study from 2019. With respect to knowledge of geography and international issues, it says Americans on average answered 53% of the questions correctly. I admittedly have no idea if that's good, bad, or meh. I couldn't find a lot to compare with. It wouldn't surprise me if there were gaps in our knowledge of international geography and affairs, because the United States itself is so goddamn big. That said, the study found that 46% of US adults regularly pay attention to international news, and that 7 in 10 believe that events around the world affect their daily lives. So I think it's safe to say the average American does care about what's happening beyond their borders. I mean, if nothing else, they gotta know where Taylor Swift is touring. Americans are monolingual morons allergic to learning another language other than their own. That's at least the sentiment from some critics around the world. It doesn't help that we have a powerful news network that soiled itself because someone sang in Spanish at the Super Bowl halftime show.
So now they're giving us Bad Bunny. Are you a big Bad Bunny guy?
Not a fan. We have a cross-dresser who doesn't speak English doing the halftime show.
Debiste prestar atención a tu clase de español. I'll admit I was surprised to find this out myself, but roughly 20 to 26% of Americans are bilingual according to various reports. So I suppose this one is mostly true because you still have the overwhelming majority of the country who are monolingual. But like anything else, it's definitely not as simple as the internet makes it out to be. And I suspect the US will only get better in this regard, even if only so they can finally understand Bad Bunny. This one I've gotten just feels like bashing for the sake of bashing, spewed by internet trolls blinded by hatred and their own failures in life. Look, I'm familiar with cultural deserts. I did a whole video about the soul-sucking banality of suburban slop. My skin has been burned by the sting of these cultural deserts. So sure, call that a cultural desert. You won't find me arguing that there's a lot of cultural value to be had by spending an afternoon traversing the sea of concrete parking that connects Target, Chipotle, and Starbucks. But the entire country is a cultural desert? Really? Our music and films are beloved around the world. Sure, some of it's garbage, but is every German film really a banger? I'm looking at you, Das Kanu des Manitou, with the white guy red-facing as a Native American as recent as, 2025? I think it's fair to say that almost the entirety of modern cinema is influenced by American cinema, which in turn has brought phenomenal foreign filmmakers to Hollywood to tell their own stories, turning the art form into a truly global cultural institution. And that's just scratching the surface. There are regions across the country like the Rust Belt, Appalachia, the South, the Pacific Northwest that are bursting with their own unique cultural tapestries. I mean, you can't listen to Johnny Cash and tell me that's not culture. And if you do, I've got the perfect poster for you. If that, friends, is a cultural desert, then give me a sun hat and a comically large bottle of sunblock for my pale ass because I'll happily bask underneath that sun. I understand that much of the internet rage directed towards Americans is of our own doing. We voted in a clown, so much of the world is treating us like a clown. But again, I'd ask people to try and hold themselves to a higher standard than the star of a future documentary on the Epstein files. I'd also ask people to hold a little empathy for the tens of millions of Americans and immigrants who didn't vote for this, and are nonetheless suffering the consequences a little more than any one of these internet cultural critics ever will. After all, who's suffering most from American live-to-work culture, unregulated gun laws, and the inhumane policies of a dumbed-down Emperor Palpatine? I'll give you a clue. It's not these ironically unnuanced Trump-like keyboard warriors. It's the American citizens and the immigrants who choose to live there in hopes of one day becoming Americans themselves. They're the ones suffering the untrained paramilitaries invading their cities, and standing up to them, I might add, in a way most of these trolls would likely cower from under the cover of internet anonymity. The world has enough Trumps. One too many, I'd argue. So I beg of you, don't be another Trump. My longest gripe with the US, though, suburban slop and sprawl. And in this video, I share how American suburbs forced me indoors and how playing The Legend of Zelda freed me to explore. And next week, I'll share what traveling to 60 countries in my life has taught me about the American dream. Turns out, dreams can also be nightmares.